So you might not think there's a lot of power in an exercise like a step up. You might go back to thinking about, bad aerobics classes and doing mindless stepping up type of actions. But a step up can be a very powerful drill if we change the intent to it. One of the best things we get out of it is it's a truly unilateral exercise that doesn't change people's stability too drastically. Meaning if Jessica places her foot up there, we're really focusing upon the top leg. So there's little cues we can give people, like to point the toes of the back foot down, or up, so that they don't put much pressure on here. So if Jessica sort of drives through this foot and comes up nice and tall, it's a very simple unilateral exercise. And she tries to control herself coming down, grabbing the box. Good. Now, what I want to point out is so we have unilateral, so we have that lateral plane strength. So stepping up is a great way to train those lateral stabilizers. It's a better way, even in fact, to strengthen the glute medius and minimus, a lot of the lateral stabilizers of the hip, because that's what actually those muscles are supposed to do. We don't walk around and the legs are all popping out like this. Those are fine exercises to implement to get activation, but as far as really integration and getting them to train as they're designed, doing motions like this are super valuable. Also, if you look at it, if Jessica puts her foot up again, what we're seeing is she's starting a hip flexion and she's going to move into hip extension. So again, much of our hip hinge patterns, deadlifts, cleans, and so forth, really start in that same biomechanical position, right? We have hip flexion, we're moving to hip extension. That means we're getting an incredible glute and hamstring exercise as well. Now, what I love about this is we can tell so many different things about compensation of the movement, and we have so many different ways of progressing the step up. For one, let's talk about the most important thing is just simply the height of the step. A lot of people in the gym will default to those grab a bench, bring a bench over, and they'll use the bench, and the bench is dictating the height, right? So remember, the height of the step is a way of changing intensity. And the reason that people see so many compensations in the step up is because they're not thinking about that. So when they grab the bench is awfully simply too high for most people. So when they're on the step, if this step is too high, what's Jessica going to do? First, she's going to lean into the movement, trying to get forward momentum to try and get herself up. Now, I know there's some of you out there that are like, oh, well, if I put my foot up here and I angle my torso, then I'm going to gain more hamstring glute. Like, yes, but that's not what your client is doing. Your client is not deliberately doing that. They're trying to get forward momentum to come upward. So as a baseline, we want to see that nice vertical torso. We want to see that pure hip extension of the exercise. So you have to make sure the height of the step is appropriate. If they're compensating just with their body weight on the step, then the step is simply too high. All right? Now we also have a multitude of ways of changing her body position in relation to the step. So obviously we've been showing guys her just stepping up, and that's sort of where we start most people. It's the easiest, most stable position to be in. And you notice Jessica, when she came down, we tried to make sure she lowered herself under control. She just didn't fall down from the step. Now I could change it and emphasize that more lateral stability if I have her face me, if she places her foot up on the step. Now, again, I want her to press down. This time I'm watching for her not to just lean forward, but I really don't want her hiking to the side. I want to try to have her go straight up and down, and she's going to drive up in the step. Nice, Jess, and then control herself back down. So we can, again, change the exercise by simply changing position. One of the last positions we could do is just move her into a crossover step. So if she places her leg over the side, very similar to what you would see in a crossover deadlift, crossover lunge, we're going to get a little bit more glute. So as she drives up, that gets that three-dimensional glute action, right? That gets that big motion of the glute involved. So again, we're not going to go through every exercise showing you all three versions. We set this foundation so you know you can change the height of the step, you can change the body position, and now we're going to show you, and we're going to begin building the step up by showing you how we can implement different load positions and different implements to benefit people doing the step up. The step up should be one of your favorite drills to use with people because it's so accommodating, so many different fitness levels, and you can use it from anywhere from rehab to high performance to fat loss type of exercises. You're going to see it's a great way to stimulate metabolic changes, and you don't have to go very fast to do it. We're building stability, mobility, and strength all at once, so let's get right down to it. So this is a great tip that you can use also for lunging. You notice we haven't used suspension straps a lot for counterbalance stuff because the way most people do it is that they grab the handles like this, just go grab on, and they would hold on and they would try to do a step up, And they try to use the handles, obviously we have this longer than they would, but you know what I'm talking about, where they would use the straps for support. And what ends up happening a lot of times are people are pulling themselves too much with their arms, and they're not getting enough into the ground, they're not building that core strength. So what ends up happening is you get very poor transfer of trying to get people from the straps to more free weight type of environments. So what we did come up with is a way to use the straps so that you do get some counterbalance, but you start to integrate some of those concepts we've been talking about all throughout. So what Jessica's going to do is she's going to actually go palms down upon her handle. And you see how the weight is out in front of her first. And what you often want to do, and we'll show you in a moment, is actually measure this from the top of the step and then come back down. That's when you'll know you'll have the right length. What she's going to do is place one foot up. And what she's going to do before she steps up is create tension both in the handles and her foot. And you notice what's engaging. Core, lats. She's nice and upright. So as she presses down, she's going to continue to push against the handles. So here, she's all nicely engaged, she's nice and upright, and she can lower herself, keeping tension, nice and slow. So again, it's a wonderful way to start building that core tension, those lats, in a way that's going to carry over to a lot of the other things we're going to be teaching. Let's try it one more time, Jess. She's driving in, and then she finishes in a nice tall position. So at the top, remember we said we're going to get strapped. So here, she should have nice tension. The hands will probably be slightly behind her body, but she'll have maximal lat engagement. And that's where we want to set the straps in the boxer relationship to her stepping out. A wonderful way to use the straps in a way that's going to sort of be cohesive with the other things that we're going to be teaching. Okay, so we're going to start using some of our max series. So remember, multiple axes. So the goal is I want to look like I'm moving through the sagittal plane seamlessly as we're amplifying especially anti-rotational forces, which will impact those frontal plane forces. Why do we care? It's very similar to what's happening when I'm walking and running, right? I have to, create some of those rotational forces to pull me through. I have to resist frontal plane. We're putting it all together. So again, you have to make sure you ensure building that foundation with everything we've gone through. And that will take you months upon months, and it'll give you lots of great results in that meantime. So don't rush to do the cool new things that you're seeing us actually use. Now, we're going to that front hold position first because, again, I can use that tension to my advantage. So you're finding a lot of times when I have to default to something new, I'd rather be in that nice plank position to create, a little bit more feedback. So in a moment, I'll place my left foot onto the step. And when I do so, I'm going to actually set myself up in the max position. The reason I'm doing that is because it's going to be very natural for me as I step up to come into this central position. Just to remind you, again, a lot of people get focused on the load. They're like, oh, you look like you're all on the same side. That's all ipsilateral stuff. You said we work in opposites and contralateral. What's resisting the movement? This side, right? So what you'll actually find is that you almost want to fire forward, almost as though I was climbing another step or I was walking forward. That's almost what your body wants to revert to, which means we're tapping into sort of its natural system. So again, it's one of those things, it's not going to be easy, but again, you build progressions, you can change height of the step, load you're using, and so forth. So I'm going to get the weight up in the position. Now, I'm going to start with my left leg. Make sure your foot's firmly planted down. My eyes, just like before, are going to stay forward. Now, because I'm starting here, I want to make sure I create that tension in. I'm pressing through my top leg, pulling the bag apart, coming up nice and easy. That ain't look all that dramatic, but it's actually pretty challenging to do, especially on the way down. So on the way down, I want to grab the foot again, create that tension against the bag, and try to lower myself down as slowly as possible. So again, I'm not in a rush to do another rep because I want to try to minimize the impact of that down foot. Pull, 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 and back down. So when you're going through these progressions, the nice part is, again, looking for the subtle things that people will compensate on. Don't get just in the mix of just doing a new exercise. Remember, just like we talked about with the max through everything, the goal is not to create this massive rotation. We're creating this slight thoracic rotation to load up that oblique chain and, again, allow that to create that dynamic movement that we'd use in things like walking, running, and climbing. So, again, we're going to test the band. So we're going to have a smaller USB here. And because the band's providing a different vector of force, I'm going to use a little bit of a lighter load. Now, is this progression? Is it regression? Depends what you're trying to use it for. If you have a client that doesn't understand where they're moving in space, but they really shouldn't be doing this because they're a higher level, but still, if they're having a hard time finding out where they should be and how to control this, having that feedback of the band with a lighter load could be a nice regression to just using the max lunge without the band. On the same token, if you want to increase the challenge, obviously if I use a little heavier load or if I just use a little heavier tension in the band, I would amplify my ability, my need to pull myself through using the opposing obliques. So again, it's not as black and white a linear system. What I hopefully want to do is give you guys the concepts so you guys can choose and think about what you're trying to achieve through the exercise. But hopefully this is making a lot of sense. So if I go ahead and get in this position, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that there's tension on the band to start. And I don't want the most tension here. I want the most tension when I'm standing up, all right? Because again, it's one of those things, I'm going to pull the bag across, and that pulling across is going to make me create all that tension. So I'm going to set up.
Oh.
I'll be fine.
Okay.
I'm going to set up, create that tension, and then I drive. I'm going to pull in. And you see how it wants to pull me into that frontal plane. So I really have to anchor down. And I have to anchor down as I break myself back. So the nice part is, it's a very natural point where I want that most tension. I want the most tension right there. And I'm getting that tension when I'm in what? In a more stable environment. I'm right straight ahead. I come down, it loosens just a little bit, so I can learn how to control the exercise. So it's a really nice way to sort of amplify that. And again, depending upon what you're trying to do, whether it's challenge someone to another level or give them a little bit more feedback, it's a great way to sort of utilize those tools all at once. So I know there shouldn't be a lot to say about pulling weights in the suitcase position, and kettlebell or dumbbells are not going to be dramatically different, other than just the kettlebells are going to feel heavier because of their weight distribution. But it's good to remember some of the little nuances. So again, now that we are taking away some of that feedback, we're putting the weight down by the side of the body. This is where, again, you'll see people want to lean into the movement unless they create that proper tension. So a lot of it's going to go back to how we use the hands. And just simply think about, once I'm ready to go ahead and perform that step up, I really want to clench down, because that clenching the handles, you see what happens to my shoulder, my core gets more engaged, I feel more stable. You're going to prevent a lot of the forward movement that a lot of people see. So again, just going to deadlift his weight up. Again, she puts one leg up. Now, when she's ready to step up, she's going to create a lot of that tension. So, creates a lot of that tension, then she's going to lower herself down. Now, if she goes ahead and loses that tension, just relax the hands and goes up, that's where you're going to see a lot of that lean forward. If she creates the tension, though, and she still leans forward, that's an easy sign that either your step is too high or the weight is too much. All right? So let's set those down just for a second, Jessica. Relatively simple things, but it should make your coaching job easier in helping you understand what your client needs to be focusing upon and possibly what they're not doing. So if we can, the nice thing with kettlebells, we can manipulate their positions much like we did with the lunge, where we can place one in the rack position, one down in the suitcase. Now, what I generally like to do is have the heavier weight upon the opposite side of the leg that's stepping up. So I'm just going to place the weight in her right arm. She'll be stepping up with the left leg. Now, are you going to die if you don't do it exactly that way? No, but I'm trying to get you to be consistent with the idea of that cross pattern that we want the heavier load. Now, the nice thing is having that load down by the hip still is allowing me to still create that tension and balance because I've loaded the side, so I'm not completely unilateral. So again, it wouldn't seem to make sense to most people, but if I actually have a little bit more weight, it's going to be easier. When I start taking the weight away, that I'll do very shortly, it's going to get harder because I don't have that feedback. So if you want to stress that lateral plane, that's something we can do. We'll talk about that in a second. So let's just get in the position. She's going to bring one kettlebell up in the rack, and she'll deadlift the other one. So she's going to place the left foot upon here. She's going to squeeze here. She's crouching down, keeping that elbow in the rib. She's going to drive nice and tall, and down nice and slow. So we're starting to build a little bit more frontal plane stress into the loading pattern. We have that cross pattern here where we have a little bit more of a challenge. Nice challenge, yes? And she's going to set the weight down. Good. So just seeing how you can manipulate the weight a little bit to get different outcomes. It's great because, again, you don't need a lot of different weights. Now I'm going to show you something. I'm going to grab the power back for Jess. Now this may seem like a minor thing, but it's going to play a big difference. If she places the weight onto the shoulder, that's going to be different than pulling the weight in the rack as we've talked about previously. So having the weight upon the shoulder immediately starts pulling her to the side, so it's going to amplify that frontal plane stress. And as Jessica stressed, you want to make sure that you drive the elbow towards the rib. If you're flaring the elbow way out, that's not obviously what we want. So again, if she were to pick up the elbow, it'd be the same pattern where the left leg will be up, and we work on that step up. And you'll find that with the higher position of the load, a little bit less feedback that you can attain, a little bit more difficult it becomes. So again, a great and meaningful way to combine these implements into your step up.